Hi. Hi, guys. So I'm just going to preface this with Sarah likes to yell a lot on roller coasters. So if my voice cuts in and out, that is what has happened. I've worn my vocal cords out yelling yesterday. But I am SF Rogers.
And I am DL Golden.
And this is the Author's Chaos podcast.
Yeah, and as always, before we get started, we are not professionals. Do not take our advice as gospel. We're going to give the best advice we can on this and just talk about our experience, but hopefully you'll find that insightful and helpful. But just so
And if you don't find it helpful or insightful, let's hope that you at least get a laugh at the both of us at some point. So oh, goodness. So what are we talking about today?
All right. Well, today I figured it's my turn to ask the questions this time. So I figured we would talk about first drafts and editing and what that processes look like. As you know, my book's been out for about a month in its completed form, and so I am pretty far away from the first draft stage of doing that. But it is my understanding that you have some very exciting news to share about your book, Execration of Autumn.
I finished my first draft. Yay, round of applause. I finished my first draft. I was so nervous. I'm not going to lie. I came into the last chapters and I had to write a couple of really, really hard scenes. And there was one point where I walked out of my office because I had made it a point. I was like, these scenes, I'm going to by myself write them. And I came out of my office and Davey was like, are you okay? And I just started crying. And he was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I just have to read this to you because I have to know, one, if it sounds kosher, like if I'm getting the scene across, because I'm seeing it through the lens of something drastic happening. And I don't want to leave things out because I can see it in my head, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can see it. Right?
Yeah.
So I then had to go and read these really hard scenes back out loud. And as I'm reading them out loud, I'm like, okay, it's okay. I can do this. I can read this scene. He's like, Davey's like, Sarah, you wrote this. You're making yourself feel this way. And I'm like, you just don't know.
It doesn't really work like that.
It's so having it done is crazy. And I feel like it's crazy because with my ADHD, I start a lot of stuff, but I don't ever actually finish it. So to have something that's chapter 1 to epilogue is kind of nuts to me.
And slow down for just a second. Let's put that in perspective.
Yeah.
When you say chapter 1 to epilogue, what is your word count number that you're sitting out at the very end there, do you think? Just rough estimate.
Off the top of my head, 96,000 words.
That's insane.
Off the top of my head, 96,000 words. And that's even after, so I saw a TikTok and I can't think of the author's name, but I have found him. He's great. I found him on TikTok. He gave kind of a piece of advice of once you finish it, step back for a couple of days and then come back to it. So I did that. I finished the first draft and I was like, okay, I'm not going to send it to anyone. I'm just not going to touch it. I'm not. And I came back to it and there were a couple of spaces where I had repeated things that I knew needed to be just completely. So that's 96,000 words after I chunked out very large portions of repeated story, if that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, 96,000 words from beginning.
Congratulations. That is a massive accomplishment. That is a lot of words, guys. I mean, that's it. So does it feel good to finally have at least a rough version of your story told from start to finish?
Yes. I think when I started, you and I talked about I am not a plotter, so I didn't know from day one exactly how the story was going to go, right? I knew opening scene because I saw it, and I knew how I wanted the last chapters to go to push Cora into the 4 books that I'm writing, to push her along on the main story. But the middle, the beefy parts of the book, I don't plan out. So to like imagine a world and drop characters into it is crazy,
Hmm.
right? But then to like look at this document and be like, I started an adventure. Like I have successfully started something that hopefully when people read it, they're like, hey, I want to know what happens next, you
Yeah.
know?
So you're 90,000 plus words into this story, right? How much longer is that than say the longest thing you think you've written prior to that? I know you've written other stories, but they were short stories, correct?
So I wrote a lot of short stories in high school and in college because I was in a lot of creative writing classes. And it was very easy for me to like, because in a lot of those classes they tell you, okay, this is the genre you're writing, this is what you need to see happen within a page and a half. So you very quickly figure out like, what can I cut, what can I leave out. This is the longest thing I've ever written. I have a story that I started probably my second year in college that's, I think, 70,000 words. So I was still super in the throes of like short story.
Hmm.
So there's not a lot of world building that
Yeah.
happens. And when I go back to that, I'm like, okay, so you can definitely tell from that story, because that story doesn't even like have a name.
Hmm.
I had just sat down and like let my daydreams go, and I was super big into werewolves at the time. So it's a werewolf story, but it like, when I say bare bones 70,000 words, I mean it's like you're here, then you're here, then you're here. There's like no transitionary
Right.
things. And that comes with age, right? Like it comes with like writing and like more reading more books
Hmm.
will also change your writing. So this is definitely the longest thing that I've written. Um really, really happy that it's not like Lord of the Rings esque long or George R. Martin long.
Yeah,
You
we're
know what
not
I'm
pushing
saying? Like,
150,000 words. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
that's good.
But
I'm glad. I'm
I'm pretty
glad you're
proud of
happy
it.
with it, and I'm very proud of you for finishing it because that's a big, big, big accomplishment. I think Origins ended up being 70,000 words or something, but working on the sequel, I'm in chapter 6 and already at 20,000 plus words, and so I'm like, okay,
Right.
it's going to be a bit beefier. But
Yeah.
you have finally gotten through writing the full story down. What has that process been like for you to get to that point? Did you have alpha readers? Were you just doing this on your own? How did this go?
So when I started, I knew about beta readers from um, another author that I followed for a very long time. Like I've followed this person for a long time. So when I first got started, I knew who I kind of wanted to be like my proof editor, and that's our sister C Britt. She has been through those first 7 or 8 chapters. When I got to chapter 8, she sent it back to me, and I was getting into the throes of like super thick stuff happening. So I stopped sending her chapters because I was like, you know what? I can't edit and write at the same
Yeah.
time. I was trying to do that, and it was hindering what I was writing because I was going back so much, which is why again I had repeated parts of the story because I couldn't remember where I was when I left off writing from editing. So I stopped having it edited. But very, very early, I asked a group of women that I trust very much. And I wanna reiterate that. Like I trust these women with my manuscript. So I sent them copies of the completed draft as soon as I like took that couple of days to like look at it.
Mhm.
I I want to like err on the side of caution that I do not want my manuscript out there for the masses. It is so easy for people to take your work, change a few words, and you lose your story, right?
Yeah.
Like we've seen it. I know you've heard about it on TikTok. Like that's a very skit. Like that's my baby. That's 96,000 words out of here that I have like lovingly curated and put together, right? So I found a group of, I think it where I have 3 in my beta readers like group, and then my 2 sister-in-laws are like the 5 women that I'm like, you 5 are going to get to read my baby, and you're going to get to see these parts of me. But I'm, again, trying to be very, very close to chest with it, just because it's in the infant stage, right? Like when you have a baby, you don't bring just everyone to your house to hold your
Yeah.
baby. So because I'm not through first edits, I'm being very, very specific, and like, these are the people that are getting a copy of this because I trust their opinion. They're avid readers, so they're avid readers from different
Mhm.
genres. So they don't just read, like, one of my friends reads a lot of horror and like thriller romance, right? Others read more fantasy, others read more just romance. So I wanted, one, a plethora of women that I trusted, because it is a romance. Like, I love our men who follow us. I'm super glad y'all are here. It is not a knock on you guys whatsoever at all. I just know that these 5 women are very close to me, and it's like sharing my baby with them. So beta readers were something that I was very adamant I was going to have in my first, because I think, in my opinion, I think a beta's reader opinion is important. And there's a lot of things that as an author you write into existence that a beta reader is going to go, I'm so sorry, but this doesn't make sense. Can you explain it to me? I'm confused. And I think when we don't have that, that's when we run into a lot of the, well, you're obviously self editing in reviews and things
Mhm.
like that. I know the more eyes you have on it, the better fine tuned it becomes,
Mhm.
right? But I also know that the more eyes you have on it, the more risk you run of somebody being like, well, this is my story now. So I'm very picky and choosy. And I see all these people who are like, I'm sending my book for free to 1,000 ARC readers. And I'm like, I'll send my book for free to 10 or
Right.
20. Like, this is my
Right.
baby.
Well, and a lot of those people you see are posting that out at a much later stage. Like they've gone through the editing
Yeah.
process. And so they have a
Oh,
secured
yeah.
file or something that
Right.
they can then have people read that cannot just be published to KDP as
Right.
their own work. But it's important to get those beta readers, and I did not have beta readers when I wrote Origins, and if I had known better I would have. That would have given
Right.
me outside perspectives on what things look like, how things sounded. But in my way of thinking, it was, well, what if nothing comes of this? If it never gets published, I don't want people reading this.
Right.
And that's a fear that I think we both realize that you have to shove off to the side in order to do this. um,
For sure.
if I can give any piece of advice to anybody listening, it's to get beta readers, get people who can, not cruelly, but can rip your stuff apart and tell you this doesn't make sense,
Rip
this
it
doesn't make
apart. Hmm.
sense, this needs fixed. Because what works in your head just might not work in everybody else's. And so I think
Well,
that's a really good idea on your perspective, even this early in, to have a beta readers lined up. And you talked about going into the editing process. Seabrit is editing your book, correct? Okay.
yes, yes.
So when I had heard you were sending her chapter by chapter and editing it, that gave me a panic attack. So I can't imagine sending the raw first chapter to someone of my book without my eyes going over it and over it and over it again before sending it off. Um, you're going into the editing process now, and you said you stopped because I'm sure it was a lot. Her sending you back chapters and you having to fix chapters prior.
Well, the hard part, like I had said, I was by the time I got to sending her chapter 7
Mm-hmm.
and 8, I was in chapter like 13 or 14. So I'm double chapters
Yeah.
ahead, right? So then she'd send the chapters back to me, and the hard part wasn't doing the actual editing, like putting in commas where I'd missed it, or putting in exclamation marks or periods or whatever, like the stupid stuff that you miss when you're
Right.
typing really fast, right? The hard part was I'm in this part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like I'm writing this scene. But I get these chapters back and my brain goes, hey, you need to fix this. This is back. So then I'd go back to like chapter 6 and go in and start fixing. Well, then my brain's like, well, this doesn't make sense with this further down the road. And it turned it into where I had quit writing new stuff because I was too busy worried about what was happening in the kind of like in the rear
Yeah.
view mirror. I turned it around where the rear view mirror was way bigger than the
Right.
windshield,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So I had to like stop and be like, hold on, the rear view mirror is this big, the windshield is this big. I need to get through
Mm-hmm.
here. And then I can go back and be like, okay, this doesn't make sense. Or I told this story 3 times in the span of 4 chapters. Like I need to change that or cut that out. So the stressful thing about it was the pressure that I put on myself when those emails came back that she had finished editing certain
Mm-hmm.
things, the pressure to like, I have to go home right now and fix everything she found that's wrong. When in reality, like those could have sat in my email until I
Yeah.
was done. And then I could right now be going back through emails and editing. But instead, I've stopped myself. I've sent just, it's raw and I
Mm-hmm.
know it's raw. And you like your wife will get a very raw copy
Mm-hmm.
of this book. But again, the women that I sent it to, I trust their opinion. Two, they're not they're going to rip it apart. I know
Mm-hmm.
this, right? Like I want them to be honest. But I also understand that each of these women love me in a way to deliver that news without killing my love for writing or killing my love for the
Yeah.
story, right? Because I think as humans it's very easy to look at something somebody created and be like, well, I don't like that, or I wouldn't have done it this way, which
Mm-hmm.
is fine. Like you're allowed, you're entitled to that opinion. But I wanted my beta readers to be women who, one, would be honest with me, but two, would be able to deliver the, hey, so in chapter 3 you said such and such, his eyes were this color, but by chapter 8 his eyes are this color and his hair is different. What were you smoking, Sarah? Like what's going on? Or Sarah, you've told this part of the prophecy 12 times. Like can we cut out the other 11 and just leave this one here? Like I
Yeah.
need that, right? Like I need the people to be like, "Hey, girl, do you even know English?"
You're you're telling me you're moving into this editing process, and you've been through part of this already because you said you've sent off these early chapters, and I waited with mine
Mm-hmm.
until the very end. I mean, it was all the way done, and which was fine because she would send me back a chapter at a time anyway to fix.
Right.
You get those back, and it's just red mark, red mark, red mark, and your brain screams, "Oh no, I up!" And so you
I'm a
right?
fraud.
And so I think that it's a good idea. I know a lot of people, some people will go through and they will send it off chapter at a time and edit as they go. But I think if you get too bogged down in editing, you're never going to get to the end of your story because editing is not the fun part of doing this.
I would have never gotten to the end had I continued doing what
Yeah.
I was doing. I just never would have moved past where I was, like until I caught up with
Yeah.
editing, right? And then even then, there's still things you can go back through, and like Grammarly will be like, hey, this sentence could be more concise. I just had to turn
Mm-hmm.
Grammarly off because it's like I'm not even going to look at the fact that there's 567 mistakes that it is
Right.
finding right now. Like, nope.
Yeah, I shoved mine through Grammarly after Cassie got it back to me, and it still found 3,000 errors, like in commas and things. I'm like, oh my god. So it's just a process. I mean that minor stuff like fixing commas and stuff, I think Grammarly is great for as you work through. But if you're talking about, oh,
Yeah.
this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, you've got to get the raw, rough outline out first to your editor before you can
Yes.
start saying, okay, what do I need to fix? Because then you're just looking for issues to make your writing more complicated and hurt
Right.
yourself. So I think that's
Right.
that's a good thing. So, do you expect from that editing? Do you expect there to be some pretty major changes between now and then, or do you think that your story is going to stay relatively the same after your editing comes back? Because I don't feel like my story changed very much, but there was a lot that I had to work through.
Um, so the very like in love with the story
Mm-hmm.
part of me wants to tell you that no, the story will not change. It will stay the same. Um, but I'm also in the camp of if I get notes back from my betas and they say, hey, this is this one thing is too much to digest. Can we move it to the next book or even further
Mm-hmm.
out? If that comes back where it's like you gave way too much information in this book, like then yes, some things will change. There are other things that like I'm nitpicky about because I feel like an imposter, right? Like there's no way this book's going to be any good.
Never goes away.
So there are things about like some of Cora's powers and some of the things that she can do with her weapon that I know I did not explain it
Mm-hmm.
well. I know I didn't. Like I know in writing it that when I go back or when I get back to those chapters where she's figuring out that she can do all of this stuff, um, or the fact that she Nightshade is the patron deity of wrath. When she figures that out and that her powers are tied to the wrath inside of her, I know like there are things that they're going to come back and going to be like, what do you mean she can just suddenly control water? Where did
Right.
that come from? Why? Why can she do?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like, I, 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 I want to believe that the story is perfect and it could go straight to print right now. But like, I'm also not naive, and I know that there were scenes where I rushed through writing it because I was so excited with what I
Right.
was writing that I left things out. So, um, I don't think anything major will change though. I don't think there's going to be anything that's like a character has to die, a different character has to
Right.
die. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
you're not
Like,
going to compromise your vision
so,
for that, but
right.
it's important to have a growth mindset going into it, and I think that's good.
Well, I I also want to point out that like at the end of the day, even if my beta readers come back and they're like, "Hey, I don't like this character. I think he needs dropped." It's still
Yeah,
my
and
story.
you're welcome to always say no.
And that's still their opinion. Now like grammar things, yes, I will fix those. But like if someone comes back and they're like, "Hey, I really don't like these unseelie fae and the way that you've designed them."
Sorry.
Well, sorry, not sorry, but it's my world and that's the way they are. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want to be smug about that, but like at the end of the day it does come down to what the author wants to do. And if there's something that your betas all agree on that you're kind of firm on, like maybe start questioning, hey, okay, wait a second. So if none of my readers have liked this, is this really what I want? And then at the end of the day, if one beta reader's like, yeah, I don't really like the way that character is, but the rest of them are like, he fit the part perfect. Like sometimes you just have to take that opinion and, tuck it away and just kind of dwell there for the next one. So I would definitely like just on the air of caution of like, yes, it's great to have
Mm-hmm.
those other opinions, but at the end of the day, it is still your story. And it needs to be told the way you want it
Yeah.
told. Because you're the creator of it, right? Like that's your
Well, and
creation. So not saying don't value those opinions, but like we say at the beginning of this, it's this is opinion. We're not professionals. We don't do this all the time, right? Just like my beta readers are not professionals. They all have day jobs. They're just reading this for me out of the kindness of their heart. Like it's great.
right.
But fundamentally, I don't think my story is going to change very far from where I have it. Like I said, there might be some things that get tweaked, but like nothing huge fundamentally that would completely change like the end of my story or
Yeah.
whatever. So,
It's yeah, I think it's a very fine line. You can take criticism on your work very very easily, and you should be willing to accept criticism. But
Oh
I
yeah.
think that if you are really dead set on a character existing, really dead set on certain characters being the way that they are, you've got to stick with that because you have a vision of what the future looks like, whereas your beta readers and things don't. And so if you
Mm-mm.
compromise those things, you compromise that vision. You don't know what kind of ripple effects that could have on your writing later on down the road. You need to write
Right.
something that you're proud of because at the end of the day, is this probably going to make either of us a ton of money? Probably not, right? But if you're proud of what you have out, proud of the thing you've put down, love the characters you've written, I think that's more than enough validation for that. Right.
Right. Well, and I posted a TikTok, and I know you saw it, talking about my tyrant, who is
Mm-hmm.
one of my villains. And there was a moment where I wrote a scene for him, and I stopped and I was like, I hate him so much. I want to go back and erase him from the book completely. And I posted a TikTok about it, right? Like, I was like, is it bad when your villain makes you this mad? And someone, don't even know them, commented and was like, just so you know, if you hate him that much, your readers are going to hate him that much, and you're succeeding in what you're doing. And it kind of made me like, okay, so I can super not like a
Mm-hmm.
character that I'm writing, and it's going to convey pretty well if I
Right.
don't like them, right? Like, I don't know if you and I've talked about it in the podcast or just in person, but like I wanted my villains to be in this place where they've crossed a line where
Mm-hmm.
there's no redeeming them. Like, I think it's great that a lot of like superhero tropes right now are redemption arcs for like Loki and all of that. But I was very dead set that like these villains are villains
Mm-hmm.
for a reason, and they've crossed a line that there is no, like, there's no turning back. There's nothing you can do at this point to salvage what you think you have left. And I hope that that comes across the way that
Yeah.
it needs to, right? For because they're villains, they're not going to be. I mean, of course, you have the people who love villains, right? And that's great. We love you guys. We appreciate that you love our characters, but there's not redeeming qualities from my
Right.
villains. I'm just gonna let you know that. Like, there is not, like, at the end of the day, I'm not gonna look at my usurper and be like, yeah, we can salvage her. No, no. Her head's going to end up being removed from her shoulders. Like, she's going to be unalived at the
Right.
end of all of this.
That's fair, I think. So you've gotten through all of this stuff. You're going into the editing process. How long do you think it will be until we are holding your book paperback in our hand?
So I need to get back all of the feedback from my beta readers, and then go through it again, and kind of just, I personally want to go through it as a
Mm-hmm.
reader myself. I think that that was another piece of advice that I saw, that was like, print it out so you have paper in your hands, and read it as a reader, not as an editor, not as this, but like, read it as if you're reading this book. So I want to do that. And then I'm using Perky for my cover. So it comes down to like all the logistics of getting everything polished and put back together, and getting a cover. And I want to continue to build hype for my book. I want to continue to get followers on my TikTok and my Instagram and all the things. And um, uh, I'm not expecting to like end up huge, right? Like, end up a huge author on Book Talk, or a number one
Mm-hmm.
bestseller on Amazon, right? If that happens, great. Like, I will jump for joy. But I'm to this point where like the fact that I just finished it
Right.
is huge. And the fact that I have something that I'm like talking about getting a cover for, or having like a second edition, um, is kind of insane to me. I hope, fingers crossed, to have books, like printed books, by March of next
Right.
year. I
Very
hope.
tentative.
So like, tentative deadline for March of next year. So uh yeah, that's kind of the timeline. And I know a lot of people sit there and they go, that's a really long time away.
No.
It's really not. It's really not that far away. Not at all. So, yeah, March of 2024, I hope to have Execration of Autumn in a place where you can buy it and have a physical
Okay.
copy in your hands.
Well, what advice, that brings me to my last question then. What advice do you have for others for getting to this stage of writing? So, getting all the way through finishing the first draft, what advice do you have?
One, if you have an idea, no matter what other people around you or what your own brain tells you, just write. Like, sit down and write. I don't care if it, and several people laughed at me for writing on pen and paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or with pencil and paper. Um, but write in whatever way makes you comfortable. If that means you have to go sit in a park and take a sketch pad and just draw the first thing that comes to mind so that you can get your story kicked off, do that. But just write it down. Your first draft is always going to be
Yeah.
rough. Hook, line, sinker. That's my number two. I would not worry about what the first draft looks like. Get from point A to Z, get there. And then in the next couple of drafts, you can polish it. It doesn't have to be perfect the first go round. I know mine's not perfect, right? Three, don't be scared to share your heart with other people because there are going to be parts of you in your
Yeah.
writing. Like it's inevitable. There are parts of you that come out. Don't be scared to let someone else's eyes see that or see those vulnerable parts of you. I know that there's I was super nervous sending that first email out. Like, did not want to send anything to my beta readers. I was like, I am a fraud. This is the worst decision I've ever made. And I heard both you and JC Bryce in my head where we were like, just send it. Like, just do it. Like, it doesn't have to be right the first go round. Like, it doesn't have to be perfectly polished. It doesn't all, like, yes, it needs to make some type of sense, but it doesn't all have to be so cohesive right off the bat. Like, I have time. I have no deadlines. I'm not writing for someone. If you, especially if you're self-publishing, take your time. Take those steps back once you finish, like once you get to the last line of your book. Take those 2 days to not touch it. Don't look at it. Don't open it. Just sit. Just sit with the fact that you finished it and then get back into it and start editing or send it to whoever you want to. But that was the best decision I made was I wrote my last line in my epilogue and I saved it and I shut my computer and I went outside and I sat on the porch and Davey came out and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "It's done." And he's like, "So now to edit." And I'm like, "Nope, I'm going to give myself 48 hours, kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a writer's detox, right?" Because I think you get to a point where you've looked at a whip so much that you have lost
Yeah.
the vision of it. So take that step back at the end, but just write. Like, no idea. I had this conversation with someone the other day. She got into the rabbit hole of book talk where they're like, "Oh, if this happens, I don't finish it. If this happens, I don't finish it. If this happens, I don't finish it." And she's like, "I just don't think my story is a good story." And I said, "Okay, hear me out. Just finish writing it. Like, sit down
Mm-hmm.
and just finish writing it. If it doesn't go anywhere from there, it doesn't go anywhere from there. That's fine. But if you have an idea, don't be scared and don't let somebody else tell you that someone's not going to like your story because there are going to be people who thoroughly enjoy what's coming out of your imagination. Just write. Like, just get out there and just be brave enough to write. And it took me, heck, I'm 33, right? Started writing at 16. Took me that long to get to a point and enough people to be like, "Sarah, just go do the dang thing." Like, just do it. What's the worst that could happen? You print it and then you sell 2 copies, right? That is literally the worst that could happen. Or someone gets on there and says, "This is like an elementary child wrote it." But at that point, I have growth, right?
Right.
I have space for growth. So, worst that could happen is it never goes to print, or it does go to print and you sell 2 books. I mean, just right. Just
Exactly.
get it
And
out there.
if you're a young writer, don't wait until you're going on 30 or 33 years old to put something out. You don't have to do that.
No.
You put stuff out. If people hate it, use that hate to grow from it. Don't sit there in fear and
Yeah.
not do it, because if you never put anything out there, you will never see anything out of it. You just don't. So,
Well, and the crap they throw on you turns into
right.
fertilizer for your growth.
Just
So
do it. Right?
just just
No, I
just
love that.
right.
I love that advice. I think that's fantastic. As being someone who has finally published their first book, it would never have happened if I did not have annoying people in my life that wouldn't let me not do it, you know? And so it's
Right.
one of those things. If you have something, some good idea, something that you think matters to people, um, put it out there. And if people love it, they love it. If people hate it, they hate it. But that experience will help you grow and help you become better. So I think that's the
For
best
sure.
advice you can
For
give.
sure.
So I think that is all
For
the
sure.
questions I had for you.
Awesome sauce.
So I think we are tying this one up at about 36 minutes here. Anything else you want to add there?
Thank you for listening to us. Find us on runawaydaydreams.com. You can find me on Instagram at Lilac Cursebreaker Series. You can find me on TikTok at SF Rogers Author. You can find me on Facebook at SF Rogers. Think that's all of my handles. I think.
All right,
I'm
so
fairly
that puts
certain.
me up there. So for me, you can find me. My main place that I post is TikTok. You can find me at DLGolden8910. If you are on Facebook, I am there as DL Golden. You can find my book Origins on Amazon. It is for sale right now in paperback and ebook. So please, if you want to, check it out. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you guys.
I'll drop all of our links in the description and hope to see you guys
See ya.
soon.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us.